Hello and welcome to Rockdale Community Forum's first interview, and we have Mr. Larry Cox here with us today. How you doing, Larry?
CJ, I'm doing good, and I'll let you know I figured out while your countdown was going on how to share this over to This Week from Rockdale. So you're actually
Awesome.
live on This Week from Rockdale right now too. So
That's good.
you are my
I was
first uh, uh, guest podcast over there. So thank
awesome.
you. Well,
We're,
yes,
we're learning. We're learning as we're going. So,
yeah. So
all
I
right.
saw that option and I shared you. So you're broadcasting over on This Week from Rockdale right now.
Well, I guess that's why my numbers are going up now. All
So
right.
are they really?
So, just a little bit.
Gotcha.
Thank you. That helps. That helps a lot. Um, last week you had Danielle interview some, and y'all got off topic just a tad bit, and she had some questions left over, and we're going to go over those right quick. One of the
Okay.
questions was, how will you help people in the community understand the state of the schools, especially if the kids are in school? The idea there is that a lot of people don't believe the hype about the schools, or maybe even have kids who are successful in the school, and they don't realize how bad the things actually are. So, how would you get them to understand how bad things really are in the schools?
I was at a forum this past Saturday, and I don't. Did you watch the forum Saturday that the Democrat
I got
Party held?
the tail end of it.
Well, one of the questions there was an interesting question. They asked a very similar question: how would you be able to
Hmm.
reach out to the public and engage them and let them know what was going on? So, my answer was this, CJ, that I would initiate town hall listening meetings, and
Hmm.
first thing that you'll hear from this group of board members and this superintendent is they'll start these false things that as a board member I'm not allowed to have a town hall. Well, this past Monday, state school board member Helen Rice, who represents District 3, had a town hall meeting in Lamar County down in Barnesville at the
Hmm.
Lamar County Board of Education. So that's totally not true
Yeah,
propaganda, misleading information. As a board member,
you're elected officials, so.
I would hold town hall listening meetings, and I would be able to listen to what people were saying. But not only that, I would bring people in, parents of students who are experiencing the difficulties with the educational system, and let them give their testimony. CJ, let them
Hmm.
say what's going on, what they're facing, what plight's going on. And then they asked me, and then one of the members sort of rebutted what I said and said, well, we have these small cluster meetings and nobody shows up. So I asked to be able to rebut that. Okay.
Right.
And I said, as a private citizen, I have had town halls that have had
Hmm.
overflow rooms. CJ, you've been to them,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? As a
Oh yeah.
private citizen, I have had town
Hmm.
halls that have had overflow rooms. So, as a Board of
Yeah.
Education member, what kind of town halls do you think I could have, CJ?
Oh, it's going to be overflow as well. Yeah.
So that's
Especially if you're
what you
talking about
do.
the topics they want to talk about.
Yeah, and this is what you do. You have these town halls at different times so that
Hmm.
everybody
Yeah.
has the opportunity to attend. See, they have these meetings at the most inopportune times where nobody can
Right.
come to, right? So
Hmm.
you have
Hmm.
these meetings at different times, different variables, so that the
Hmm.
people are able to actually come to these meetings and they're able to express their concerns. And then as a board member,
Right.
I would not be representing the board as an entirety. I would be there just
Hmm.
as a board member, hearing the concerns and bringing people in to actually tell their stories, their
Right.
testimonials. Then, as a board
Hmm.
member, it is my obligation to go back and report to the rest of the board and the superintendent the
Hmm.
concerns of the community. So that's how I would do that, CJ, by town hall listening meetings, different times, inviting people and getting people's input. Because we've got to care about what people think. I mean, you might have watched another forum that I was on this week, and these incumbents said point blank they didn't really care about the taxpayer or the
Exactly.
citizen. It was all about the kids and they were just going to leave everybody else out of the equation, and you can't do
Yeah.
that.
No, you can't. Because number one, they're the ones that got you in there. Because kids can't vote for you, so that's going to upset them a little bit. So yeah, and the different times, because like you got parents that work morning shifts and you got parents that work night shift. So that's why you have to have it different time, and even on the weekends sometimes.
Yeah, you do. You
But
have to. You have to. It has to be. Uh, you have to be flexible, CJ. If you're
right,
not flexible, then you're not going to have people attend.
right. The second question she had was a person from Rockdale was wanting to know if there was a plan to raise the scores of the school. She says that they used to be very successful, and now they're failing. What is your plan to fix that? I'll
we
go ahead
we
with that
were
question.
we were a very successful school system at one time,
Mm-hmm.
and over the last decade and a half, we have lost that edge and begun to decline. One of the
Right.
things we do is they try to ignore or not recognize that a good number of the kids are falling behind and not performing, because at all the board
Mm-hmm.
meetings they roll out the performance of the top 10% of the kids in Rockdale County, which I am proud that we have these intelligent kids that are the top 10% and they are overachievers and they're performing well. That is great, but those
Right.
overachievers are going to overachieve whether we provide them special programs or not. When we
Mm-hmm.
asked at the forum the other day, I was asked what programs, because I did bring that up, right? And what
Mm-hmm.
programs and such are available now? And they started, well, you can stay on Saturday and go to school. You have this. And Danielle brought up the point that Saturday school is perceived as punishment. It's not
Right.
perceived as an advantage. What I think we need to
Yeah.
do, CJ, is I think we need to bring more parapros into the school system, and we actually need to bring more teachers into the school system, cut down
Mm-hmm.
the teacher to student ratio even lower than it is, so we can do more one-on-one work with kids while we're in the classroom. We need
Right.
to identify the children who are falling behind in reading and math early. We need
Mm-hmm.
to intervene early. We need to make sure they get the help that they need early. And the only way to do that is to provide more teachers and more parapros. Now, how do we do that?
Yeah.
We've got to take a strong look at this budget, and we've got to cut some things. We've got to cut some people at the central office and shift that money to the classroom. We have to cut
Mm-hmm.
all these unnecessary vehicles that we
Vehicles.
have,
Yeah.
and we have to put that to the classroom. And we've got a bunch of unnecessary programs, from what I've been
Mm-hmm.
told by insiders at the school system. We've got these programs that they'll buy, and they're not free. You buy these programs. So they buy these programs, they use them for a year, they don't get the miracle results they want, and they just shelve them after we've spent millions of dollars on these programs. So CJ, it's we need to reduce the number of people in the central office. We have a $6.8 million budget there. Reduce that
Mm-hmm.
budget, shift that money to the
Oh,
classroom with additional teachers and parapros. We need to reduce those vehicles, shift that money, reduce those programs that are inadequate and we don't use, and shift those funds to the classroom. We do it by teachers teaching kids. That's how we do it. And we have to reduce that teacher to
right.
student ratio. That's how we do it, CJ.
And the other thing about the Saturday school, most of these kids that are failing are not up to standards, as you would say, are in the maybe the poor class, so maybe they can't get to Saturday school.
Yeah,
That's why I think
you
it's
might have
important.
transportation issues and everything too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like Daniel said, and several other people said it, right? Saturday school is
Mm-hmm.
perceived as punishment, CJ. It's not perceived, oh, you
Right.
can now go to school on Saturday. No, we have
Mm-hmm.
plenty of time during the school day to educate these kids. So we
Right.
need to take advantage of it. You know what I mean?
And she was just saying Japanese children attend school on Saturday to advance. That's the difference here in Conyers. So we have a totally different education here in the United States,
We have a different
totally
culture.
than
We have a
Japan, I
totally
would
different
think.
culture. We have a different
Culture,
culture,
yes.
CJ. So you have to actually look at the culture you're
Mm-hmm.
in, and is that an acceptable practice in this culture when it's perceived this
Right.
way? Now, let's just take those 10% overachievers that they roll out every week at the when they do the BOE meeting, those kids probably wouldn't mind going to school on Saturday, right? And it's just
Right.
like a lot of these kids in foreign countries that do the Saturday thing. It's not every kid that enjoys going to school on Saturday. It's going to be those overachievers that won't mind going to school on Saturday. So I think there are several, but the key to it is more one-on-one, and then it'll be less. It'll be reducing the student-teacher ratio and adding parapros. And I do understand at the board meeting this week, they said even though that parapro discussion was just a discussion about reducing them and this and that, they had a serious discussion about it during the budget talks this past week at the BOE meeting. So it was more than just discussion. They intend to actually to do this outsourcing, CJ, which they, somebody, a parapro may get $1 or $2 or more an hour, but then you're going to have to pay for your whole benefits, your whole health insurance. So that $2 that you made, you're going to lose because it's probably going to take you $5 of what you're making an hour to pay for those benefits. So you're actually going to come up with a net decrease in pay by shifting to this. And we're picking on $13 an hour employees, CJ, the least of the least. But that's what these characters do. And that's what this board does under the leadership of this superintendent.
We got a question in the chat. Let's pull that up. It says, what about the teachers being available on weekends for a few hours of tutoring, one with the kids that need it?
From what I understand, that is something they offer now. That is already a program that's in place, CJ. They already have Saturday school.
Okay. And the second part of that question was also, is there enough actual interaction between students and teachers, or is the county depending too much on computer programs or various types of distance learning to teach kids? What is your plan to attract and keep quality employees?
Well, CJ, that'd be a hard question for a board member, a current board member, to answer, more or less me, because they don't let board members go to the schools to observe. So I don't think there's actually a board member who could answer that question, because they don't know the ratio, because they're not seeing it firsthand. As a board member, when elected, I will make visits to schools. And let me tell you, this is going to be another thing. I overheard a conversation after one of the meetings the other day, and a board member told a taxpayer, a voter, well, by Georgia state law, we're not allowed to visit schools. Again, CJ, not true. That's false. Right. They have a policy in place that you have to notify the superintendent and get permission to go to the school, which he's not supposed to deny you, because there is no state law. The law is that you can't interfere with the educational process. You can't interfere with the day-to-day observation, but there is no law against you going and observing. So CJ, I couldn't answer that question, and neither could any board member really answer that question, because they've not been in the school system observing what any ratio is of one-on-one versus a digital learning. So until board members start going to the school system and observing the educational process, you can't answer that question.
Yeah, because now you got I want to know how much that costs to put a computer in every hand of a student, because that had to cost a pretty penny too.
Well, I think they said like $2.5 million to provide all of them but those computers are bought with SPLOST funds, not general revenue. They are bought through SPLOST funds. So they are, and if you want, I'll address the SPLOST real quick, right? I support the SPLOST, but I support the SPLOST with some changes. I think there needs to be a citizens oversight group to actually be able to have input and to monitor and to actually know where our tax dollars are being spent or our SPLOST dollars are being spent. Right now, we do not have a citizens oversight committee involved in the eSPLOST. And if I'm elected, that's one of the things that I'm going to recommend, that the board establish a citizens oversight group for the eSPLOST. I don't have a problem with the SPLOST as long as we have a citizens oversight committee which oversees the spending of those dollars.
Gotcha. Uh, so like I said, I went on your website and I went and looked at your issues that you're standing for, and we're just going to go by each one and see how he was going to deal with that. And the first one on there, it says replace Terry Oates as superintendent and conduct a search for the right person to lead the school system to a successful future. How is
Well,
that going to be?
I'm probably the only candidate that's running that's bold enough to actually make the statement, right? I'm
Right.
not the only one that feels that way, and you know that, right? So, but this is the way it goes. When Terry Oates' contract was renewed last year, it was renewed by a 4-3 vote. 4 votes for,
Wow.
3 votes against.
Okay.
I am running against an incumbent who was a yes vote. If I defeat that incumbent and Justin Kenny is reelected, or one or more of the other challengers beats an incumbent, there's
Mhm.
many different scenarios that comes up with
Oh, yeah.
a switch of that vote, right?
Mhm.
If I'm
Yeah.
elected, I believe we will have a shift of the majority of the school board.
Mhm.
My vote will enable us to be able to remove Terry Oates at the first
Mhm.
board meeting and begin the process to search for the right superintendent for the Rockdale County school system. CJ, when a sports team is struggling, the first thing they do is they change the head coach because
Yeah.
poor performance on the field actually starts with poor leadership at the top. And it's the same thing in any business
Mhm.
organization, in the military, and the school system, right? So poor
Mhm.
performance in the classroom is a result of poor leadership by the superintendents, by policies and educational procedures that he has put in place.
Mhm.
So for us to
Right.
think it's going to get any better with the same leadership at the top, we're not thinking clearly. And we've got to also realize we've got to change the leadership on the Board of Education. One of the things
Mhm.
that these board members will say is, well, you need to learn your place. You need to learn what board members do. I agree with that 1000%. I think
Mhm.
the current board members need to learn what their potential could be if they actually did their jobs instead of
Yeah.
believing the nonsense that the
Right.
superintendent tells them that they're not allowed to have a say or input. The board must
Mhm.
approve all policy, they must approve the budget, and they must approve the hiring of the superintendent. So if the board doesn't approve the policy and says, bring me policy back I can approve, then they just can't do anything they want, can they? If the board says, I don't approve that
Right.
curriculum, bring me some curriculum back that I can approve, then you will approve a curriculum that the board agrees with. If your board says your
Mhm.
tenure has been long enough, Mr. Superintendent, we're going to part ways, then that's the board taking a position and following their authority. This board doesn't realize the authority they have because they believe the hype and they believe the propaganda that this current superintendent has been feeding them.
All right. And then number 2 is invest your tax dollars wisely to assure that the students of Rockdale County receive a quality education.
I think I've mentioned
I
a
guess
lot of
that's
that. We look at the budget
right.
and we look at
Mhm.
how we're allocating money. That comes all down to allocating tax dollars.
Mhm.
Instead of having 3 and 4 assistant superintendents or something, let's just have an assistant superintendent. Let's reduce those numbers. Let's shift those monies to the classroom. Same thing with vehicles, same thing with programs. But we take a deep dive, CJ,
Mhm.
and we look at that whole budget. Like right now, there's people that want an audit because they want to look at that budget and see how we're wasting money. But the board and the superintendent,
Yeah.
majority of the board, again, it's 4-3, right? It will be 4 of the
Mhm.
members don't want an audit, 3 do, and the superintendent pushing. I said on the thing the other day, the superintendent circled the wagons, and those 4 board members, they covered the rear. That's exactly what happened. So we've got to actually do an audit, determine where these dollars are being spent. We know where a lot of them are being spent. It's allocate monies the proper way.
Right. And one question about the oversight committee: if they find something like the citizens committee, how will they be able to bring it to the board's attention? Is that how that would work?
Yes, it would work that
If
way.
they find something there,
If the
okay.
not the that would be an audit, right? Let's say we audit it.
Mhm.
The board would get a full audit report of the findings of, if there are any irregularities or wasteful spending that's occurring, then the board would get a full report that would detail how the funds are being spent.
Gotcha. Number three on your issues is reduce the school board budget by 20%. We've been talking about this, so over a 4 year
It's
period by
actually a
cutting
little
the budget.
different. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead and
So
read it.
yeah,
Want me to go ahead and read it? It says
read
reduce
it.
the
It's
school
actually a little
budget.
different.
Okay. Reduce the school budget by 20% over a 4 year period by cutting the budget 5% each year over the 4 year period.
So this is what we do. When the bureaucrats put their budget together and they bring it to the board to approve, we demand that they cut each department 5% to get a total 5% cut across the board, right? Let me tell you, CJ, you can find 5% waste in anything, right? So let's demand we do a 5% cut, right? And with that, now that's different.
Number one.
Yeah, that's different from reallocating, right? This 5% will be different from reallocating money and putting it to the classroom. This will be a total 5% reduction in budget, right? Reduce the budget 5% and then put those savings back to taxpayers. Give them a tax reduction from that 5% each year. And over a 4 year time period, give now, CJ, am I going to be able to accomplish this? This is going to be an uphill battle. This is where I'm going to come into some conflict with some of my people that I serve on.
Right.
I will tell voters, if you don't like the fact that the people I'm serving with haven't cut the budget and cut your taxes, then when they come up for reelection, let's run some candidates who will mandate that we cut the budget and cut taxes and elect them the office, because it all comes down to who you elect to office. If you, the voters and taxpayers, want this, and I'm going to say, if I get elected, I'm going to be elected because these are the platform that I ran on. So I'm going to suggest it and I'm going to propose it. And if my fellow board members won't go along with it, then the voters of Rockdale County, it's up to them to then act and vote people that will be on the board with me, that will share my ideas.
Right. And that's why I feel like any elected position that it's like, it's not important, but it actually is, because, the school board, determines a lot. Like we were saying, with your taxes and your money. So we have one question on here. So there was a presentation at Thursday's BOE meeting about the athletic division director. Where in the budget priorities do you think the athletics program should be?
Well, this is going to be, something that I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to support athletics, and I'll tell you why. That a lot of times I went to school with a good number of kids that if it wasn't for the athletics, they probably wouldn't have finished school, right? And that education is very important. Athletics it's not only about the act, but it teaches us valuable lessons. It teaches us how to get along. It teaches us how to work together. I'm going to tell you, I'm a very successful businessman, CJ, right? Do you know where I learned most of my skills of running a business and running crews? Sports and athletics. Sports and athletics. That's where I picked these skills up on how to communicate, how to work with people, and how to work as a team. I picked those up in athletics. Athletics and they are very important to a community. Athletics are something that brings a community together. It brings bonding together. I believe athletics
Mm-hmm.
are a core part, just like I believe music programs and art programs. Those are important programs that we need to make sure are funded,
Mm-hmm.
and that we continue to run in the school system. Now, do I think they need additional outside funding from boosters clubs and fundraising? 1,000%. That needs to continue, but it also needs to be something that the
Mm-hmm.
board would continue to prioritize, because the value that it brings through life lessons and what you learn as an individual are just extremely valuable, CJ.
Yeah. And then let's see here. Number 4, you already talked about it. Conduct town hall meetings so you can carry out your voice to all the board meetings. We already been
Yes,
talking about
and
that.
you heard me, and you heard my explanation of that, right? And it brings value, because I asked a question. I asked it on Facebook, and
Mm-hmm.
I asked it
Right.
at the forum. When's the last time you've seen a Board of Education
Mm-hmm.
member have a town? CJ, do you know of a
Right.
town hall head by a Board of Education member? I don't. Do you?
No,
And
not.
any of your listeners, could they actually tell me a town hall meeting that a Board of Education member has had regarding
Right.
education? I don't know of one. And if they did, they didn't advertise it because they didn't want anybody to come to it.
Right. Right. And I would say too, since a lot of people on media and like what we're doing here, I would hold it virtual too, because that's part of
What
the
my
town
plans is,
hall meeting.
I have a location, CJ, that is able to actually stream. So
Mm-hmm.
I would stream the virtual, the town hall, right? I
During the
don't know
meeting.
if I would be interactive with it or not, but I would stream the town hall, right?
Right.
So, but I would offer it
Right.
as a media a platform for people to be able to watch. We would stream it.
Gotcha. And then got 2 more here. It says number 5, to reduce the tax burden of the seniors in Rockdale County by establishing a tax exemption for seniors to allow them to maintain a home ownership. And you was talking about before we came on a
We
legislation.
talked about,
This
yeah,
would
we
be a
talked
great
about
point.
581. That is a great piece of legislation. 581 establishes like what I refer to as a rolling homestead, which limits the amount that can be paid. But I'll go further than that. As I want to answer that question first before I talk about 581. CJ, I would actually propose a resolution from the board that we establish a seniors homestead exemption where seniors at a certain age are exempt from property taxes. That's what I would do,
Right.
because I believe at a certain age, a retired senior citizen, they've done their duty, they've paid their fair share. The average life expectancy in Georgia is like 76 and a half years old. When someone's 70, 72 years old, they should be out of the, because that house is just going to be out of the system for a little bit and then roll back in. Now we would have to actually look at it and see, what phase in, phase out we would do or whatever. But most of the counties around us have that. Most of the counties that touch Rockdale County have a senior exemption, CJ. Rockdale County doesn't. So again, this is something as a board member I would offer as a resolution. I don't think the people that are going to, I don't think they would support it with me. But again, this is something that taxpayers can look at, right? And they can decide when election cycle comes again, do we want to elect these same people, or do we want to elect people that are going to vote with Larry Cox and do these changes? Just putting it out there, right? Like I agree with some people I think that are going to get elected right now. I think I can work with. They may come on board with these kind of things. We're going to look at it. We're going to be reasonable. It's going to take compromise, because we can't pass anything that bankrupts the school system, right? Whatever we pass, we still have to be able to have enough money to maintain the school system. So it may be a higher age than I like that we have to exempt it at. But I do think we need to do some kind of senior exemption. And then you've got House Bill 581. House Bill 581 does several things. It creates this floating homestead, right? that limits the amount that taxes can be increased each year. Then it also it creates another penny sales tax that the county, the city, and the BOE would enter into an intergovernmental agreement, and they would split this revenue, and it would go to each one of their coffers to help reduce their millage rate obligation. That would lower the tax rate. And then there's a third portion of this, which I'm going to switch over and read this. You guys will still see me, but I'm going to be looking at something different. So what this legislation does, it also changes some language that are on your tax bill. So right now you'll have the Board of Education, the County Commission, and the city, all these elected officials will say, well, we lowered your millage rate, so we lowered your taxes. Well, there's a thing called a rollback rate. If they put it at the rollback rate, then that's net zero. That's even. That means they're not raising your taxes and they're not lowering them. But if they adopt anything above the rollback rate, they're actually raising your taxes. But if they would adopt something below the rollback rate, they raise your taxes. So let me read this statement that's going to have to be put on your tax bill with this 581. Okay.
All right.
Here. Okay. Such tax bill shall include a notice containing the name of such taxing authority. In my case, it would be the Board of Education. And the following statement in bold print: the adopted millage rate exceeds the estimated rollback rate as stated in the annual notice of assessment that you previously received for the taxable year, which will result in an increase in the amount of property tax that you owe. So it point blank tells you if they pass a millage rate that is above the rollback rate, your taxes are increased. And they've got to put that in your tax bill. Yeah. When they send your final tax bill, it will say, we passed a millage rate from the Board of Education that was above the rollback rate, and this will result in you paying higher taxes. They are not going to like that because they can't lie anymore. They can't use that we lowered the millage rate and it lowered your taxes because this statement is going to point blank say they set a millage rate that raised your taxes. But they have the option to opt out of this legislation, CJ, and that's dangerous. And if they opt out, then they can still do what they do now and charge us what they want. But that statement will still have to be on the tax bill. Now, this is a referendum legislation, right? It passed the House, passed the Senate, the governor signed it. It will be on the ballot in November for the taxpayers to determine if they want the Homestead Exemption Act passed. And I don't know anybody who won't.
Right. And then choose to say and make sure those teachers get paid too, or, even get a higher salary if that's possible. How much on average does teachers get paid? Do you know that?
CJ, I think we're talking between 50s and 70s. It depends on tenure, how long they've been a teacher, or whatever. I mean, it depends on what degree they hold.
Education.
It's there's a variable there, right? So it's going to be, 50 to 80,000.
And how would the and then how would the parapros? How would they be paid? Like how?
They're paid hourly.
What would hold their students?
They're paid hourly. And I do agree. We need to pay people what they're worth, right? But I'm also a believer in this. If I pay you something, I expect results. If we give pay raises, we can't continue to have a failing school system, right? Do you agree with that, CJ? Because it's not all we've got a lot of problems in Martindale County school system. So we have to start with the top.
Yeah.
And we have to get that problem situated, and then people have to start stepping up. You know what I mean? That reason goes away, right? Now, when that reason goes away, then you've got to step up and start teaching.
And this is one of my questions I like that should be addressed anyway, but it says reestablish discipline in the classroom so teachers can teach.
Yep.
And with
Yep.
that form you had last week, they said that the school superintendent wanted to build their own sheriff department. Like, really? But we already got
Yeah.
school resources off.
We have some
So
school resources
go ahead.
officers, and then they removed some of them. And with COVID money, CARES Act money, they hired some guys that run around in golf carts, and they pay them $80,000 a year. Now, if we would utilize the sheriff's department, we only pay half of the salary. The sheriff's department pays half, and the Board of Education pays half. I would like to eliminate the private security that we have and partner again heavily with the sheriff's department so that we can have a joint partnership with the sheriff's department and reduce some of that cost. Plus, we have police officers, right? And they'll have a heads up of what's going on, so we can hid some of this gang violence and stuff that's going on in the community. Because let's not pretend we don't have gang issues and violence in the school system. We do, CJ. And and one of the main factors that when you talk to educators today is they are having a hard time disciplining children because they don't get the backup from the principal and the superintendent. They don't get that backup. Teachers are having a difficult time maintaining order because they don't get the backup they need to maintain order. So we've got to do that. We've got to reestablish discipline so teachers can teach.
Right. And I have another question here. It says, this goes along with that question. It says, apparently there's graffiti on the school grounds, and she was wondering, how can we get the graffiti off the walls of the school? And I guess that would go along with the police as well.
It would be the policing. And, I had a friend go to one of the schools this past week, right? And he went there and he took some photos. And I think next week he's going to go to the board meeting here in a few weeks, and he's going to talk about this, right? But he saw some inappropriate dress, inappropriate behavior, and it was just rampant. And nobody said anything or did anything. It was just allowed. So, that kind of, if you allow that and you allow the graffiti, and it's just, if you allow it and don't stop it, and you don't correct it, then CJ, you reinforce an atmosphere of that you just don't care and do what you want to do. And how are you going to be able to educate in that atmosphere of, well, we don't care, just do what you want to do? That you can't have that atmosphere.
No,
you have to maintain discipline so that teachers can actually teach.
Right. And I think this goes back on your other question. It says, how do you qualify to do your job to a teacher? Are you going to grade your teachers based on student achievement, test scores, or improvement?
I think we're going to definitely have to start out by improvement. I mean, we're in such dismal condition right now that I don't think you can expect a miracle. I actually think if we make a lot of improvements, we may decrease initially before we go up, right? So I think we're probably going to lose people and things are going to happen, and we may go through a couple years of instability before we stabilize. So I think we definitely have to measure initially on improvement, and then I think we take and look at it and evaluate it and see what the best ways to measure are. But I think it comes across the board, right? You have to evaluate how the school board's doing. You have to evaluate how the superintendent's doing. You have to evaluate how those that are educating are doing. And we need to come up with solid parameters and solid ways to gauge it. I think initially looking at improvement is the way we have to look at it initially to get it off the ground.
And then test scores, and then are we really teaching if we're just teaching our kids to take a test? Because that's really been the thing lately. Are they really teaching, or are they just teaching to teach a test?
Well, I've heard that argument so much, CJ, because if they don't teach the test,
Hmm.
then they don't score well, then they get in trouble, and then you know I
Right.
I'm not a fan of teaching to take the test, right? I'm not. Um,
Right.
but I think if I offer somebody a well-rounded education and they're able to read,
Hmm.
comprehend, and do math, I believe they're going to score well on those
Hmm.
tests. I really do. If
Right.
I educate them and give them the basics that they need, they're going to be able to score above average on those tests. And that's what I look at. I look at scoring above average a lot of times is better than scoring, you know, those those false numbers at the top because we prepped for the test. Well, I
Right.
would rather know what your real knowledge is rather than what your memory is.
Gotcha. And don't you think it's important to have a standard measure? You have to be able to compare apples to oranges, or apples to apples, I guess.
Apples to apples. It is important
Yeah.
to have a standard measure, right? Um, but I think
Hmm.
we've got to determine what that standard measure is and how do we get there. I don't think we're
Hmm.
in Rockdale County. I think we're in such a dismal state right now that the standard probably is not very well. It's not very good right now, right? So we do need to know
Yeah.
a baseline where we're at, so
Hmm.
we know what improvement looks like. So you
Hmm.
do probably need to have that standard, right? But I don't know if we put as much emphasis
Right.
on those tests. I'm just to me, I believe in a quality education, sound basics, and being able to be above average. I had several professors in college at
Hmm.
point blank told me they would say we would rather have a solid C student than an A student because we feel that the C student knows the subject and the A student memorized enough to get an A, but they're really a C student. I mean, I've heard many,
Hmm.
many, many, many of the teachers tell me that, so I believe that also.
Wow. All right, Larry.
But then
I think
again, my
that's it
job is
from.
not to be an educator, right? My job is to
Right.
listen
Right.
to educators, evaluate, and come
Hmm.
and hire the right people to get this school system. They're going to come with me with their ideas, and if they sound
Right.
reasonable and they sound like they're going to work, then I'll say, let's try that, right? And if we
Hmm.
try it, then it doesn't work. Let's not keep doing it, right? Let's
Yeah.
change. Let's do something different.
Hmm. Right. Uh, so if you like what Larry's saying and what he's wanting to do, how can people get in touch with you?
They can go to my website, votelarrycox.com. They can go to my Facebook page,
Got it there.
elect Larry Cox, or Larry Cox, or This Week from Rockdale. I'm not hard to find. I
Mhm.
put my phone number is
Right.
actually on my Facebook page. So people call me
There
all
you
the
go.
time.
Yeah.
I'm there. I mean,
Yeah.
just reach out to me and I'll have a conversation. And when I'm elected, we're going to have these town hall listening meetings and you're going to get the chance to come out and tell me what you want. And
Hmm.
I'm going to go to the board, present these ideas because we've got to start listening to people. We have to start listening to educators and we
Right.
have to start listening to the community. We need to start listening to the people that are in the classroom that are dealing with these kids and know
Hmm.
what the struggle is and know what the pitfalls are. If we don't listen,
Right.
then we're going to keep getting more of the same, CJ, more of the same.
Hmm. Right. And I think that goes along with same a little bit off topic with the board of commissioners. They need to start listening to the citizens. If they don't listen to the citizens, they're going to get out of their job. So
I
I
got
thank
a
you,
good
Larry,
feeling
and
people are getting out
thank
of
you
their
for
job
being.
this year, don't you, CJ?
I do
So I
too.
got
I
a
do
feeling
too.
some
I
people are
think
going
this
to
is
get out
going
of
to
their
be the
job
year.
this year. I think
Hmm.
this year,
Yeah.
CJ, is going to be similar to 2012. That
Right.
it's going to be one of them elections that just upends and just flips
Hmm.
things all around in Rockdale, which is needed. It is desperately needed, CJ.
Right. Yeah.
So if
There's
I'm
a
gonna,
time and place for everything. You had your fun. Go ahead.
yeah, I just want to make just a small little closing comment if I could.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
So guys, it's plain and simple. It really is. If you want things to change on the Rockdale County Board of Education, you've got a choice, a simple choice. If you vote for me, there will be change on that board because I will be a force to be reckoned with on that board. I will not be shut down, and your voice won't be shut down because if I'm on that board, your voice will be heard. But if you want your voice to continue to be silenced, then you vote for Mandy North, and the same thing is going to happen over and over again. You won't have that change vote. Terry Oates will remain superintendent. The educational system will still decline, and you won't have a voice in this county. That's what I vote Larry Cox for real change.
All right. Thank you, Larry. I appreciate you being my first candidate here, and we're learning as we go. And again, reset Rockdale. I like that. So let's get out there and vote. Voting begins. When is that?
Monday after next.
April 29th.
Yep.
Early vote. And we need to early vote because it's better than election day, in my opinion. Because where they have my district don't make any sense. So, all right. Thank you, Larry. I appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.